This was kind of more recent news that the Vikings called the Panthers on draft night. They offered pick 14, pick 90, which is in the third round, pick 143, which is in the fourth round, in exchange for pick number 8. According to this tweet, this is from My Sports Update, the move up would have been for either Justin Fields or Rashawn Slater. I have a hard time doubting they would have only done that, or they would have done that for Rashawn Slater. That's just my personal thoughts. I think it was Justin Fields all the way, and further proof of that is they drafted a quarterback in the third round in Kellen Mond. So, Vish, what are your thoughts on this trade, a potential trade up?
So if it was Slater, right, Slater does fit their zone running scheme and all of that, but I'm with you. I have a hard time believing it was for Slater, and I only say that because they traded down and then Darrisaw fell in their laps and they took him. It didn't seem like they were very, very like, oh, crap, we missed out on Slater. I need to now go get
a tackle.
Right, tackle immediately and take Darrisaw. They said, no. You can come up and take Vera Tucker, who's actually a little similar to Slater, except Vera Tucker, I guess, is a little smaller, so he projects more as a guard. But they were both that kind of guard-tackle hybrid where they're smaller athletic tackles or phenomenal guards. And they said, you can take Vera Tucker. We'll slide all the way back. Oh, look, Darrisaw fell to us. Now the value's too good. We have to take him. So I'm with you. I think it would have been for Justin Fields, and I actually think Justin Fields would have been an incredible fit for their offense. If you're looking at when we talked about Fields before the draft, obviously we don't need to keep rehashing Fields, but the point is, like, I really like Fields, you really like Fields, and we talked about how a Tennessee-style offense could be a good fit for him in the NFL. Well, the Vikings don't have the exact same style offense to Tennessee, but it's similar, and there's some things that are very similar, including the tight split two receiver sets and looking to push the ball down the field off hard play action. So I think Justin Fields would have been a great fit. I actually think Kellen Mond in the third round was really good value for them.
Yeah.
I think Kellen Mond should have been a second round pick. So like getting him 1 round later, in my opinion, is awesome value, especially with him going after Trask and 1 pick before Mills, 2 guys I thought he was just better than, flat out better than. Mm-hmm. So I think that was good value for them. But yeah, I think it's just interesting that they traded up so aggressively, because I think they do have a good quarterback. And I think if they stacked up their roster more, they can win with that quarterback. The only problem is, if you have right now they have a roster that's probably capable of going to the playoffs, and they have a quarterback who takes them as far as their roster is capable of going. He doesn't raise the ceiling of their roster, but he doesn't lower your floor. He just takes you as far as you're capable of going. And because for financial reasons and draft pick reasons, I'm not sure if they'll ever be able to get that one or two guys, that'll really, really put them over the top, because they have a lot of star players. They just don't have that complete depth of brilliant roster. And because of that, I think it's interesting that they went up to they were considering going up to get, if it was indeed Justin Fields. But yeah.
Yeah. I agree with most of the points you brought up. First, I could start with the Fields. I would be very, very surprised if that move was for Rashawn Slater. Now, I know a lot of people had him going, 8 to even the Panthers. The Broncos had a needed tackle too, and you could honestly said the same about the Cowboys. But what I'll say is this: they would not have jumped. It's just a very interesting spot, because the Broncos were a team that, you look at their quarterback room, and they're one of teams that's maybe a quarterback away from being really something special. And they were in talks with other quarterbacks. So leapfrogging the Broncos kind of tells me that they were going for Fields in that case. And then getting on to the the trade in general. So they offered a 3rd rounder and a 4th rounder to jump up 6 spots in the first round, in the early part of the first round. It seems like kind of like a half, they didn't really put in too much thought to this trade, and kind of just like, if they take this, wow, we'd be robbing them. But, we're not too concerned, because the Eagles, to go from 12 to 10, traded the 84th pick, which is a 3rd rounder. So they traded a 3rd rounder to move up 2 slots. They tried to trade a later 3rd and a 4th to move up 6 spots. So I don't know how serious they were about this trade, because that trade offer screams to me that they really weren't fully, they hadn't fully decided they really wanted to do this desperately and were making a fair offer. So for me, that was also interesting, and just the fact that it wasn't the best trade. And then going on to the actual, trade portion of it, I kind of see why they would go quarterback. Like, Kirk has 2 more years on his deal. They haven't really, when they originally signed him, this was after they made the NFC Championship game and they got waxed by the Eagles. And, they had Case Keenum, who played incredibly well the whole season, but, they were just missing that one quarterback to get them over the top. So that's what, Vikings fans believed Kirk Cousins to be. But their roster has been nothing like that I think it was 2017 or 18, 2017.
17.
Yeah, it has not been like that 27 team. That 27 Vikings defense was something special. I think they had one of the best third down percentages in NFL history. It was something ridiculous. But bottom line is that Kirk, I don't really believe, has been given the most fair of shots, especially behind that offensive line's pass protection. It is not good, to say the least.
Yeah, it's bad.
It's very bad. I'd say bottom 8 in the league. I don't know. I don't think their run blocking is terrible. I know you think maybe Dalvin Cook makes it look a little better than it is, and I'd probably tend to agree with you there.
But it is a good run blocking line.
Yeah.
I just think it's a terrible pass blocking line.
Yeah,
terrible.
Like, absolutely horrible. I agree with you, and for that reason, I don't really think Kirk's been given the fairest of chances, but regardless of whether he's been given a fair chance, they were adamant about drafting a quarterback and developing for the future. And I honestly think if they would have made a trade up for Fields, that would have been genius. You have Kirk, who maybe can't take you to where you want to go, and you have 2 years to kind of retool this defense, retool the offensive line, and then once he's off the books, you can just splurge in free agency, re-signing your own guys, and you have Justin Fields, who's sitting for either maybe 1 or 2 years, and he's ready to go. All the kinks have been hopefully worked out by then, and you have a cheap quarterback with a couple years of sitting on the bench, and who me and you thought he should have been a top 5 pick. I think he'd go number 1 in a decent amount of drafts, at least top 3. Somehow he fell, but I really thought this would have been a great idea for the Vikings to do, and I would have been very disgruntled as a Packers fan knowing that Justin Fields is definitely going to sit for a couple years behind a quarterback who I think Kirk's really good. I guess those are my thoughts on it. Do you have anything else, really?
Yeah, I think you really covered it quite in depth, and I agree with it 100%. I think ultimately them not making the move, though, was best. And it's kind of weird to say, right? Because getting Justin Fields, in my opinion, would have been a good move. In your opinion, I think it would have been a great move. You just mentioned that. Mm-hmm. But I think for Kirk Cousins, the 2 things I don't think they've had for him is that elite defense. I think it's always been very good. And I don't know if it'll be elite because I have questions about their corners. I think they're older. Yeah. Harrison Smith is obviously still an unbelievable football player, but he's 32 and he's one of the most reckless players out there with his body. How long is that going to last? Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, 2 fantastic players, especially Kendricks, maybe the most underrated player in the NFL, a top 3 linebacker in the NFL. But like Danielle Hunter was out last year. They just don't have a great depth on their defense where if a Kendrick gets hurt, it's like, oh my God, well, what do we have left?
It kind of falls apart. Yeah.
Right. And their offensive line, again, it's not a good pass protecting offensive line. Darrisaw is a very good pass protector. I think there's questions with Darrisaw as a run blocker, but he's a very good pass protector. So that's a perfect fit for them. And yeah, getting Fields would have been incredible. But I think that Mond in the second round and then just kind of third round, and just kind of retooling this roster with Darrisaw, just getting younger talent in both their lines. And hopefully a year from now, like when you're ready to move off of Kirk or 1 or 2 years from now, you can kind of be in a position and maybe there's another quarterback you go get. Because I think while getting Fields would have been awesome, I think it would have been a little premature given that there's still aspects of this roster that need retooling, specifically the secondary and offensive line. If they can do the retooling with Kirk there the next 2 years, Kirk probably is able to get them to the playoffs the next 2 years, but it'll be a very defined ceiling because without a great roster, I don't think you can win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins. Maybe you get that roster to very good, and then you go draft the quarterback who can make the roster great from very good. So I think that at the end of the day, I think Darrisaw was an incredible pick, and a great fit for them and what they need, and maybe even a better fit because they got more picks than trading up for Justin Fields, who probably wouldn't have played for the next 2 years because beating out Kirk Cousins would be hard. So
Interesting. So I kind of disagree with that. It wouldn't fit the timeline. I think retooling an offensive line in their secondary would have been like the next 2 years would have been perfect if they just hammered that in the draft. Maybe getting more depth around. I agree with that. Like they're kind of one of those teams similar to how we talk about with the Niners. Like they have a lot of like star players that do make a lot of money, like the Kendricks, the Harrison Smith, the Daniil Hunter,
Anthony Barr.
Anthony Barr. They're paid highly. Thielen in there too, but they're paid highly. I guess Cook. I'll stop now, but they have a lot of guys, and this is a lot of teams too. Like, there's a lot of teams that are maybe more top heavy, but if the Vikings defense loses Eric Kendricks, it just seems like it just falls off a cliff, like a massive cliff. And Eric Kendricks is really that good in my mind, but I think their defense is actually going to be much improved this year, and they can actually make a push to the playoffs. Like,
right,
think of their D line adding these three guys alone: Daniil Hunter, Michael Pierce, Dalvin Tomlinson. They saw what Kamara did, and they said that's never happening again. Because those two D tackles are some of the best run blockers run stuffers in the whole league. And Daniil Hunter had 14.5 sacks the last 2 years. So that's pretty incredible out of a pass rusher. And then their secondary is really young. Pat Pete might help. I don't think he'll be worse than the guys they were trotting out last year. And I still think Zimmer's a great coach. And I think if they really did get Fields, that would be fitting their timeline and being able to fix the O-line. I would be maybe concerned with their offensive weapons as Dalvin Cook. We don't know how he'll be in 2 years. You could say that about any running back, and then Thielen's age as well. But I think Justin Jefferson's going to be great for them for a long time. And Irv Smith Jr. finally getting the number one tight end role. He's a guy to watch out for, but we'll see. I just think if the Vikings did do this, and once Kirk's like $30 million contract got off the books and Fields slotted in, even with Mond, I think it's a genius idea.
Right.
And just that once they're off the books, they'll have a quarterback who should be ready to go. And maybe they get a bridge guy, some veteran to come in, maybe start a few games or go on the bench. But man, the Vikings are set up really nicely for the next at least few years.
I agree with that. And I think even with Mon, like you said, like it could truly be special with Mon. Just one thing, obviously, before we kind of end this topic, I wanted to say is, like, obviously we know how special the down the field throwing is with Justin Fields, but can you imagine a run game of a read option play with Justin Fields sticking in the pocket of Dalvin Cook and you don't know who the ball carrier is on a play?
Crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
That sounds like a Greg Roman offense to me, Vish. I don't know about you, because I think he'll probably be gone by the Ravens then, and they could get, Greg Roman's done it with Kaepernick. He's done it with Lamar, where, for like the first 2 years, their running game is just number one in the league. So Greg Roman will be calling if that were to happen.